Hi, everyone. As Christine said, my name is Kelly Hamilton. I recognize a lot of you, which is awesome, but I see some new faces as well. So for those of you that don't know me, I am a senior quality manager on the Trailhead content team. What does that mean? Good question. My role is new as of 8 months ago, so we're still kind of figuring out what my job is, and I get to kind of shape that, which is a fun experience. But basically, I own or I support a lot of our internal systems and processes that help our writers create and maintain and test quality Trailhead badges. So there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of different aspects I won't bore you with, but that is my job. Before that, I spent a few years on the Superbadge team, and I worked with a couple of you on that realm, so thank you for your support there. I'll be talking more about Superbadges later. But what are we here for? We're here to talk about how you can create meaningful experience before you have on-the-job Salesforce experience, right? Which I would assume is many of you right now, right? You're getting ready to start your careers. You're at the very beginning, right? So I want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Thank you to the user group leaders for starting this program. Mentorship is an awesome and super important thing, and so it's really cool that you guys have created this, and it's awesome to see how many people are involved. So thank you. Before I get into the meat of my presentation, I do want to say a little bit more about myself. So almost 7 years ago exactly, I was a part-time receptionist at an asphalt company in Grand Junction. I was making like barely over 30K a year, which is not a lot. I was a new mom. We were struggling to make ends meet, and I was feeling super guilty because I wasn't using my college degree that I was swimming in a bunch of student debt over. So I applied for a role at the University of Colorado, so that's where Christine and I met. But my role to start there was an event planner. And as luck would have it, we used Salesforce to plan those events and to help market them. So that was my first exposure to Salesforce. Before that, I had zero Salesforce experience, and how could I? I had never heard of it before that. I also had minimal tech skills, and I have bolded and underlined that for a reason, like very minimal. Like I was starting from scratch. Technology was not my strong suit at that point. I did have a marketing degree, and I was going into a quasi-marketing role, so that was one check in my favor there. Fast forward to now, I am now financially secure in a way that I never thought I would be, so that is wonderful for both me and my family. I'm also a certified application architect on the Salesforce platform, which is a far cry from minimal tech skills. And Rad Women Code was a big part of that, so shout out to them. And I also mentor in a lot of programs like this, a lot of workforce development programs. So this picture is actually with one of my mentees. Her name is Lee. She is a Paralympian. She was an archer, and she is looking to start her career in the Salesforce space. And this was us at Dreamforce last year. So you'll see some of my mentees throughout this presentation. I've glossed over a lot of what has happened in the last 7 years. Like, that's quite a long time in the Salesforce world for sure, and even before 2017. So I will talk a little bit more about that later, but my point here is that we all start with zero Salesforce experience, right? But that doesn't mean you don't have valuable experience already, or you can't create experience that can help you land that first job in the Salesforce world. So I want to talk about 4 different ways that you can build your experience, your Salesforce experience. So we'll talk about volunteering for nonprofits. We'll talk about non-Salesforce experience. We'll talk about Superbadges. I told you that was coming. And then we'll talk about personal projects. And this is a shout out to what you were talking about, building your own portfolio and your own personal projects using Salesforce. You'll notice 2 major things that are not on the agenda. Despite my role on the Trailhead team, I am not going to focus on Trailhead, nor am I going to focus on certifications, not because they're not important. Hopefully that's not a surprise to you all. Not because they're not important, but because those 2 things get a lot of attention, and I am assuming that you are all bought in to Trailhead and certifications, that those are valuable things. You absolutely should learn on Trailhead, and you should try to earn a certification or 2. And as you progress in your career, you should continue to learn on Trailhead, and you should continue to pursue Salesforce certifications. You know what they say about assuming. If you are not bought into those things, and if you don't think they're valuable, come talk to me. I'd be happy to tell you about those things. But I want to focus on the less frequently discussed ways that you can gain experience. So those are not in here for that reason. Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Volunteering. I want to talk about volunteering at nonprofits. This is super common advice for people that are just getting started in their Salesforce careers. And so I wanted to make sure I covered it, but My advice to you might actually be surprising, and that's because I would generally not advise you to do that. My good friend Gordon Lee, he leads the nonprofit Salesforce user group in San Francisco. He actually convinced me that that was not good advice for people that were new to the Salesforce ecosystem. And that's because inexperienced admins or developers can cause a lot of trouble in a nonprofit org, especially if they don't have the support or resources to, I think he calls it unpretzeling your mistakes if you make any, or to support it after you hand off the project, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of issues that can stem from volunteering at a nonprofit if you're not experienced already. So you should never volunteer in order to learn. You can volunteer if you already have skills in that area, right? That aligns with what the nonprofit is looking for. So if that is truly the case, if you have the skills that the nonprofit is looking for, I have some do's and don'ts outlined on the right-hand side. So again, be honest with your experience level, both with the nonprofit and with yourself. Work with an experienced mentor or the nonprofit's admin, and that way they can help guide you through, make sure you're following best practices. They can help you if you get stuck, that sort of thing. A lot of nonprofits actually won't have an admin, so they've used consultants or other people that have volunteered, and that can be a red flag for you. You might be walking into an org that has a lot of issues already that you might have to try to unpretzel, but you don't necessarily have that experience, nor will you have, again, the support if you need help there. I would get really familiar with Nonprofit Cloud and Nonprofit Success Pack. Chances are they're using that, or they should be using it, but it also helps you understand how nonprofits work and how they might use Salesforce. And then I would say, this is actually advice directly from Gordon, spend 90% of your time talking with the nonprofit. Make sure you really understand what problem they're trying to solve and what issues they're running into and all of that sort of stuff, and then spend 10% of your time building. So you're going to spend a lot of your time conversing with them. Well, yeah, that's true everywhere, right? But like I'm just hammering this home for nonprofits, right? And then don'ts. Don't overpromise or exaggerate your experience. Again, be honest with both yourself and the nonprofit. Don't volunteer in order to learn. And then don't leave the nonprofit hanging. So if you hand off a project to them, make sure that you're available, or you can be available to support them if they have any questions or issues, etc. So that is my spiel on volunteering at a nonprofit. Gordon actually has an article that goes into a lot more detail about this. I've included that in the resources if you want to learn more. If you do get volunteering experience, absolutely include that on LinkedIn, on your resume, your cover letter, talk about it in an interview, etc. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is non-Salesforce experience. And for the rest of these three, I'll also talk about how you can showcase those on LinkedIn and your cover letter, et cetera, with some specific examples. So non-Salesforce experience, like I said, I was a part-time receptionist at an asphalt company. Before that, I worked for restaurants for about 10 years, everything from hosts to servers to front of house managers. And I still use those skills today. I still have to communicate. I still have to work with difficult people sometimes, and all of those things I had to do in my roles before. So I actually want to ask you all a couple of questions. So who here has worked in a customer service position? Awesome. Like restaurants, retail, all that sort of stuff. Who has ever worked on a team to solve a problem? Yeah, everybody. Have you ever had to manage or prioritize your time? Yep. Okay, well, get ready to raise your hand one more time. Have you ever had to teach yourself something new? Great. These are all skills that you can apply to Salesforce experience, right? So I see a lot of people like struggling, like, oh my gosh, I don't have experience. But you have valuable experience already. It's just all about how you talk about them and how you translate them to the role that you're applying to, right? So how do you do that? Let's talk about that. Okay, so I want to talk about LinkedIn, your cover letter and resume, and then in the interview itself. So on LinkedIn, so make sure your profile actually includes your non-Salesforce experience. You can write posts or articles about the skills that you've learned and those sort of things. Keep it short, concise, entertaining, that sort of thing. In your cover letter, highlight how your non-Salesforce skills would translate to the specific role that you're applying to. And in your resume, again, just like LinkedIn, make sure you're including that non-Salesforce experience. As you progress in your Salesforce career, that experience might kind of drop lower in your resume, and it might get shorter, and eventually it might disappear altogether. But when you're starting out, make sure you include those sort of things. And then in the interview, so use this experience in response to behavioral interview questions, because those are the things that are going to be able to, where you can tie your previous experience to the Salesforce role, right? So I put some example questions here that I think would directly apply to some of the things that I called out in the previous slide, but describe a time where you had to interact with a difficult customer or coworker. How do you approach learning something new? Give an example of a time where you made a mistake. What did you learn from it? How did you go about fixing the issue? All of those things are probably things that you've experienced before and that you can translate to a new role. Okay. Let's talk about Superbadges. So like I said, I was on the Superbadge team for a few years. I was a big fan of Superbadges before I joined that team. So I have kind of an interesting perspective where I've used them to advance my own career. And then I got to help build them. And now I get to tell other people about them, which is exciting. And I'm no longer on that Superbadge team, so I don't have to be a fan of them anymore, but I still am. So that should be your voucher there. I always start by explaining what Superbadges are, but I'm curious, who here knows what Superbadges are? Great, perfect. Okay, I'm still going to explain what they are because even if you've encountered them on Trailhead, you may not understand that they're credentials just like our exam-based certifications. That's a common misconception among Trailblazers, among hiring managers across the Salesforce ecosystem. So I like to emphasize that they're built by the same team that builds the credential exams, but they're free. And they're also built with the same like rigorous methodology. Again, I've worked with Becca and John in that context. They know from behind the scenes that how much effort that we put into those. And this is a grossly oversimplified nutshell of the development process. But like I said, I've worked with a few people in the audience today, but we work with diverse experts from around the globe that have expertise on the Superbadge topic that we're building. We use the same group of experts to test that, and then we make sure that it's actually polished and ready for prime time. And then after it's published, we make sure that we're continuing to take in Trailblazer feedback and that we're updating the badge to align with major releases, product retirements, you name it. So there is just an ongoing process. We're continuously improving them. The key thing I want you to take away is that Superbadges are both credentials, but they're also hands-on experience. So you can talk about those in an interview, right? And as you can see here, that team has been super busy. This is a tiny little snapshot of the Superbadges that are available today, and they're working on new ones all the time. So there's probably a Superbadge that aligns with a role that you are applying for. So I'll let you peruse those at your own leisure. But how do you talk about Superbadges? How do you demonstrate that experience? So on LinkedIn, you can post about each Superbadge that you've earned. In fact, we make it really easy. When you earn a Superbadge, there's a button right there where you can share it with your social networks. You can do the same on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. Is anybody still on there anymore? I got off. Okay, cool. But you can do it there too. There's still a Salesforce community there, I'm sure. You can add relevant Superbadges to your licenses and certification section. And if you need an example of that, you can look at my profile. I've added some there. And then as a reminder, don't share Superbadge solutions because they are credentials, just like the exams. You wouldn't share answers for the exams either, right? For your cover letter and your resume, list only the Superbadges that are directly relevant to the role that you're applying to. I keep saying the Superbadges that are relevant for a particular reason here, and that's because there are so many of them, right? Like you can literally earn, I think, 60 plus now, and you wouldn't want to overwhelm somebody with that many credentials, although that's great, good for you, but like pull out the ones that you really want them to see and that you want to highlight, right? And then in terms of an interview, the first thing I say is have your Superbadge pitch ready, because as I explained to you, there's a lot of misconceptions about what Superbadges are, and your hiring manager might not even know that they exist at all, so you may need to explain what they are. I will say that the Superbadge team and their partners in marketing and across the company are working to raise that awareness so that people are aware that they're credentials, but in the meantime, you may not have to do some of the legwork for us. I have a sample pitch for you that you are welcome to steal, to borrow from, make it your own. But generally, you want to let them know that they are credentials, that they're hands-on credentials. I like to emphasize again that they're built by the same team that build the certification exams, because everybody seems to know that side of the team very well. And what I also emphasize is that unlike the exams, Superbadges present real-world scenarios where Trailblazers have to apply their knowledge. So they've learned all this stuff on Trailhead. We're not teaching them anymore. They're going to Superbadges. They have to apply that knowledge. And as you all know, applying your knowledge is a lot different than learning it, right? It's also a lot different than taking a multiple choice exam where you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting the right answer, even if you know it, whether you know it or not, right? And for me, like I'm a really good test taker, but I'm good at like kind of absorbing the information and regurgitating it, and then I forget it, right? Like, does that show that I know anything? No. Superbadges, that knowledge will last, I promise you, because you will get frustrated along the way and it'll soak in deep. And then after you've explained what Superbadges are, again, like, keep it short. You don't need to go on a whole spiel like I am. Keep it, like the elevator pitch style, 30 seconds max. Then you can talk about them in the interview, right? So you can say like, hey, I see that this role talks about, user access or user setup, and I'm very familiar with that because I've taken the single sign-on Superbadge unit, I've taken the MFA Superbadge unit, and you can talk about that experience, right? You can talk about it both from a product lens. So I learned about MFA, I learned about SSO, and then I went to go apply it, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know as much as I thought I did. I had to go learn some more, and then it came back, and here's where I got tripped up, here's where I had aha moments, etc. But you can also use it for some of those behavioral interview questions as well that I've listed some examples here. Okay, so here are some examples of how real community members have highlighted their Superbadges. So Leanne, she works at the University of Colorado. She puts her Superbadges in her LinkedIn profile header, which is really cool. Again, that could get really busy. You start earning a lot, so be selective, choose the ones that you really want to highlight, but she puts them right next to her certification. So like she's positioning them there already. She might still have to explain what they are, but that's really cool. And then you'll see here that Lucy, who's another person that's helped us with Superbadges, she puts them in her licenses and certifications. So they're, again, right there with her certifications. Mateus is actually on my team. He puts them on his personal profile, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. And then your Trailblazer profile that's in Trailhead automatically shows your Superbadges. So this is where you can show all 75 of them, all 16 of them, because they automatically show up there. So you can point recruiters or hiring managers to your Trailblazer profile, and they can see all your learning in its full glory. All right. This is my favorite thing, so I've saved it for last. And I, again, really appreciate you talking about the Women in Tech group, because this is a really, really great way to gain experience. So I want to talk about personal projects. What do I mean by that? You can get a free Salesforce developer org, and you can build whatever you want in it. You can break it, you can make mistakes, you can burn it down, you can start over, you can get a new one. But what I tell people that are just getting started is build something for yourself. Like, build something that will solve a problem that you have in your personal life. Because in that scenario, you will be your own customer, you'll be the business analyst, and you'll be the admin or the developer that actually has to build the solution, right? So it's a really unique opportunity to play all those different roles, to wear all those different hats, and to have full control over the solution from start to finish. I've listed some ideas down here, like a personal finance app, family management solution, a workout tracker, a wedding planner. Really, you can do anything. What I want to highlight is the job search app, because that's probably relevant at this point to many of you, or it will be in the future. But you can use Salesforce to track your interviews, right? You can say, where have I applied? Who was the hiring manager that I talked to? What stage of the process am I in? Am I in the first interview, the second interview? Am I a finalist? Did I not get that job? Whatever it is, you can create contacts for the hiring manager, for recruiters, for connections that you might have at that company. You can build an automation that would automatically send a thank you email after your interview. So all of that would actually help you in the job search process, right? But then you can also use it to demonstrate your skills, because you've done the thing, right? You've built something for yourself that actually works and that you actually use. And throughout that process, again, like, you're using your many different hats, but you're going to gather requirements. You're going to clearly define the problem. That's kind of your business analyst hat, right? Then you're going to build and you're going to thoroughly test. That's like your admin developer hat, right? And then you're going to launch it and you're going to use it. That's your customer hat, right? And then you're going to iterate and you're going to be like, oh man, I wish I would have done that differently, or I thought this was going to work, but it doesn't. And I have ideas for improving, or there's this new solution or feature that's coming out that I'd like to test out. You can build or expand, whatever it is. So really, sky's the limit. Okay, then you could level it up. You can make your solution mobile so that you can use it on the go, right? So if you're using a job search app, you can enter your details right after the interview and make sure that you're sending that thank you note. You can customize the navigation for easier mobile use. You can build quick actions and custom layouts and that sort of stuff. Make it easier for you to use, right? Like, so make choices on purpose, but like, probably we're all mobile. It's probably going to be helpful for you. Then, and this is what I want to highlight a lot, is you can use that same org to build a custom portfolio for yourself using Experience Cloud. So Jessica here is another one of my mentees. This is a screenshot of her her custom portfolio that she built in a developer org. I've linked to it, and I'll share these slides with the leaders, so you'll have these resources as well. But in the site, she includes her experience, her certifications, resources that have been helpful to her. She shares a little bit about her journey, her current projects. Right now, she's a Salesforce consultant, so she highlights those projects. But before she had that job, she would highlight some of the things that she's built. Actually, she's built a job search app in a developer org, so she would highlight that. Like, what did she do? Like a screenshot, a quick demo, that sort of stuff. And then take it to the next level. You can really use this to show and tell, and I am emphasizing the show in this part. You can give the hiring manager or whoever might want to see your work access to your org. So developer editions come with two full licenses. You have one of those, but you have a second license that you can get a little creative with, right? So you can give them access. You can provide it to them maybe in your cover letter or message them if you want to show them what you've worked on. I would say that make sure that the person that you're giving access to would actually understand what they're seeing. Sometimes the hiring manager isn't super technical or wouldn't quite understand that, or point them to the pieces that you want to highlight, right? So to take their role and experience level into account. And the other thing I would say is control access to this user, right? So not only will that protect your work, but it also demonstrates another level of your expertise, which is security. So that's a super important thing that most people need to know in the Salesforce world. Okay, now how do you highlight this? So post about your solution on LinkedIn. You can include a short demo. You can include screenshots. Again, keep it brief, but highlight what problem you were trying to solve. And then, maybe you can offer it to help other people build a similar app to really demonstrate your skills. Share your personal portfolio describing key concepts that you've learned while building in a post, but also include a link to that portfolio in your LinkedIn profile. And you can do that at the top of your profile. In your cover letter, you can highlight the work that you've put into your personal projects. And again, how does it apply to the role that you're applying to? And this is where, again, you could say, hey, like you can take a look around if you'd like. Here's your username. Here's your password, that sort of stuff. And then in your resume, include a link to your portfolio at the top of your resume. So where you include your email, phone number, you can put it right there. I would link to your Trailblazer profile from your portfolio. So you're kind of directing everybody to your portfolio, and then they can kind of link out to some other places where your skills are highlighted. And then in an interview, again, this is going to be mostly in response to some behavioral questions, but also now you have a lot of product knowledge that you can talk about, right? So you can discuss the features and the products that you chose to use and why. Where did you run into issues? Where did you struggle? How did you get help, or how did you learn something new that you needed to apply? What mistakes did you make, and either during the process or after you launched and you started using it? And what improvements would you like to make in the future? So I'm sure you'll have lots of ideas and lots of things that you'd like to try out. So talk about those sort of things and what's kind of going to be next for you. One thing I'll call out is don't let this org expire. So developer orgs will expire if you don't log into them in a long time. I think it's 180 days, but you should check. Cool, nodding heads, confirmation. You'll also get an email if it's set to expire anytime soon. So don't worry about it too much, but make sure that you're logging into it regularly. And then, obviously keep it up to date if you're going to be using it to demonstrate your skills. Okay. All right, I want to finish with highlighting another group of students that I am currently mentoring. So this group of students met in the Salesforce student group at the University of Colorado. They competed in our sustainability hackathon in the fall, and they won, which was awesome. They built their concept that they've called Foodwise. Foodwise is a restaurant management system that helps, using AI, that helps managers predict demand. It helps them create food prep lists, and it helps them reduce food waste, which is a major problem for restaurants. These students used their experience working in restaurants. I think among the four of them, they have over 15 years of experience, which is a lot for college-age students. They combine that with their passion for sustainability, and then throw that on top of what they learned about Salesforce on Trailhead and in college. And now they actually have the opportunity tonight to win up to $100,000 in startup funding. And this is just the perfect example of bringing together all these different like tangents of experience and turning it into something real, right? Like this is a real career for them now. I mean, I'm not biased or anything. I think they are going to win. They're one of 5 finalists out of over 100 that entered this competition. It's actually right after this. So I'll be heading to Boulder. Hopefully there's not traffic, but if you want to join, it's going to be fun. It's at the Boulder Theater. Yeah, I wanted to share this not only because I'm super proud, but it's just a really great way to and timely, super timely, great way to demonstrate that these are real things that you can do and that you can make a living off of. And then as promised, I have some resources. I meant to highlight some of these throughout my presentation, but I forgot. Amanda Bauman has a great article on tips for building a standout portfolio. Ellie Matthewman actually presented to the Women in Tech group last week about how to use your hobbies to fuel your Salesforce learning. So similar concept, use the Salesforce org for that sort of thing. There's a great badge on Trailhead about building your personal portfolio. So you don't have to start from scratch. We'll walk you through it. Salesforce Ben has a great guide to getting a job in Salesforce. And then I actually presented on Superbadges in particular at Mile High Dreamin' last year, which Jonathan recorded for us. So check that out. That is all I have for you. So
what questions do you have? There's got to be something.
yes.
Oh.
Sure. I have a question about the personal portfolio. So you only get 2 licenses. You have one of them. So if you put a link out there publicly or elsewhere, it's just going to take them to a login screen, right? Like people won't actually be able to access it unless you allocate that single available license to them, right?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I would say don't share it super publicly. I would give it to people specifically. And then you probably will like activate and deactivate that, knowing when people should and shouldn't be in there. When you're setting up access for that user, you're probably going to lock it down, like make it probably mostly view only, right? Because you don't want them to be able to make any edits, right? So there's really, as long as you have that locked down, there's not a lot of harm in somebody logging into it. I know in developer orgs, sometimes people will share logins, that sort of stuff, just to kind of go around it. So there's not really a lot of harm in sharing that as long as you've locked down the access. Does that help?
Hi. Is the hackathon yearly or is just like the only time that you guys did it?
It's a good question. So the hackathon it's for CU students,
okay.
but we do it every year. I said, which is now on camera. I'm always putting my foot in my mouth. We do it every year, and we do look for people to volunteer to help support the students. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, but there are other ways, other hackathons or competitions like that you can get involved in. So you can definitely take a look. I don't know of any specifically, but those are great ways to get experience and then get rewarded for them at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there's a Flow Fest at Mile High Dreamin', he says.
One quick question about nonprofit projects. Where would you find those listed, or where would a nonprofit list those, and what are those projects like?
That's a good question. I think so. In Gordon's article that's in the resources, I think he lists some in a roundabout way because, again, he's trying not to encourage you to volunteer. But I think Catch a Fire is one. Okay. What else?
Taproot.
Taproot? Okay. Any other ones that anybody knows of? And I think that he calls out Catch a Fire in particular. I'm not sure what the other one he references because typically those nonprofits are already using Salesforce. They already have a certain level of understanding. So it's kind of a way for you as a volunteer to vet where they're at. But yeah, read the article that I have in the resources here to check that out. Is that all?
She'll answer any question, even if she can't see you.
With my terrible eyesight.
This is specific to the portfolio again, so maybe you might not be able to answer it. But you mentioned a personal finance app, and I was thinking about potentially creating a personal finance app. What are your thoughts on potentially if there's an open API to your banking, connecting that or integrating that or using a package that integrates that? Yeah.
Yeah, be careful about that. But if you can figure that out, heck yes, do that. But make sure that you're not exposing that information to anybody that you're also giving access to that org. Peter, you might have more knowledge on this.
As a follow-up to that question around, like, should I connect my developer instance to something like a personal bank account? I probably would not. And it's not to say that the developer instances of Salesforce are very robust. They follow all the same, trust features and layers. Does not necessarily have Shield enabled, being like you don't have platform encryption and that kind of stuff. But that said, there's probably a good chance that your bank's not going to let you do it. So most applications that you think of, like QuickBooks, that are connecting to your personal finance tools in Mint and things like that, have already been vetted by your banking institution in an approved connection. Banks, for good reason, don't publish a public API. So keep that in mind. But what you could do is most of your banks do have the option to be able to like export an account summary either as an Excel or as a CSV, that you could then, weekly batch it up. You could use a tool like Jitterbit or dataloader.io and maybe even do like a scheduled run, if you want to start teaching yourself some of those tricks as a possibility. So there's definitely some ideas there. And it's funny you talk about like a personal finance app is kind of an interesting idea. My very first project that I ever built as a custom object in Salesforce at the Hyatt Regency Convention Center Denver World Tour event in 2007 was a mileage calculator. I was just kind of like tinkering, like, how do I build a simple formula, a custom object, and then be able to like plug in trips, and it would roll up the amount of miles that I drove, and then here would be, the IRS rate that year was probably 26 cents, and now it's, something higher. So those kinds of things, like, definitely great experience, but I would not recommend, and I think you might struggle if you try to go down the route of getting into the APIs of your bank. Yeah, you don't want the Secret Service knock on your door. So.
But to that point, though, like if you can figure out how to integrate with something that does have an open API, like that's another way to demonstrate your skills, right? So, Slack, yeah. There you go. What's that? To Yelp? Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I think there's lots of different ways. Sky's the limit, really. I mean, the developer edition orgs, they might not have all the bells and whistles, but they're pretty powerful. They have the limited licenses so that you can't, go and build your business for free with them. But they have a lot of things in there that our enterprise edition orgs have. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do in there. All right. Well, if that's all, thank you all for coming. I'll be hanging out here for a little bit. Like I said, I got to head to Boulder for that competition right after this, but happy to chat more if you have questions.